Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was 21 and desperately needed some extra cash to pay for textbooks and the occasional pizza. My buddy worked at this fancy Italian place downtown and told me they needed someone to watch their parking lot. The restaurant was one of those places where people paid $50 for a plate of pasta just because it had a cloth napkin instead of paper. The parking lot was small, maybe 15 spaces, and the owner was very strict about it being customers only. He drilled it into my head during my first week that absolutely nobody else could park there. Not delivery drivers, not employees, not even his own staff. Customer spots only. The job was pretty straightforward most nights. I'd stand at the entrance, check if people were actually going to eat at the restaurant, and wave them through. If someone tried to park there to go to the bar next door or the movie theater down the street, I'd politely redirect them to the public lot 2 blocks over. Everything was going fine for about 3 months. I knew all the regular customers, had a good relationship with most of the waitstaff who'd come out for smoke breaks, and the owner seemed happy with my work. Then one Thursday night, everything went sideways. It was around 7:30, right in the middle of dinner rush, when one of the cooks came running up to the lot entrance. The guy looked panicked and was still tying his apron. He apologized for being late and explained that his car had broken down. He'd had to catch 2 buses to get to work and begged me to let him park in the lot just for that night. He seemed like a good guy, and I could see through the restaurant windows they were absolutely slammed. The kitchen was probably in chaos without him. I told him to go ahead and park there, but just this once. He thanked me over and over before rushing inside. 20 minutes later, the manager walked out of the restaurant. His name was Tony, and he was one of those guys who thought wearing a cheap suit made him important. He'd been working there for maybe 6 months and acted like he owned the place. He demanded to know what I thought I was doing and pointed angrily at the cook's car. I explained that the cook was running late and the restaurant was packed, so I figured it was better to have him working than stuck looking for parking. Tony went ballistic. He said he didn't care if the building was on fire. The rule was customers only with no exceptions. The guy was practically spitting, he was so angry. A few customers walking to their cars stopped to stare at us. He warned me that if he saw me bend the rules again, I'd be fired. Then he ordered me to go inside and make the cook move his car immediately. I had to go inside and embarrass the poor guy by making him leave in the middle of service to move his car. He apologized to me like it was his fault I got yelled at. That should have been my first clue that Tony was the problem, not me. 2 nights later, I was doing my usual routine when a red BMW pulled up. The driver was a young woman, maybe my age, with that look like the world owed her something. She announced that she needed to park there. When I asked if she was dining at the restaurant, she said no, she was meeting friends at the club across the street. I explained that the lot was for restaurant customers only and directed her to the public parking 2 blocks away. That's when she lost it. She screamed about how her father owned the place and demanded that I move out of her way. I tried to explain that I'd just been yelled at by Tony for making exceptions, and he'd been very clear about the rules. She kept ranting about how Tony worked for her dad and called me a stupid parking lot attendant. She threatened to have me fired while I stood my ground, thinking about that cook who had apologized to me and how Tony had made such a big deal about no exceptions. She announced she was calling her father right then and there. I told her that was fine, but until then, she couldn't park in the lot. She peeled out of the entrance so fast she probably left tire marks. 15 minutes later, Tony came walking out with his phone in his hand. He fired me on the spot and told me to get out. When I asked why, he said I'd just disrespected the owner's daughter. I reminded him that he'd told me no exceptions and had literally yelled at me for letting the cook park there. He cut me off and said not to argue with him because I was done. I wasn't even that upset. The job paid okay, but dealing with Tony's power trips wasn't worth it. Plus, it was just beer money. I told him he could take the job and shove it, then grabbed my textbook and water bottle and left. On my way out, I saw the owner's daughter walking back from wherever she'd had to park and she had a nice scrape down the side of her BMW. Looked like she'd tried to parallel park and lost a fight with a street sign. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was the restaurant owner. He said he wanted to apologize for what had happened and that he'd heard the whole story from his staff. I told him it was okay and that Tony had made the rules pretty clear. He explained that Tony had way overreacted when he yelled at me about the cook and that I'd actually done the right thing letting him park there since they were in the middle of dinner rush and needed him in the kitchen. He went on to say that when his daughter showed up, I was just following the rules Tony had drilled into me. He didn't blame me for being strict after Tony had just chewed me out. Apparently, the whole thing had caused drama at the restaurant because all the employees took my side. The cook had told everyone how I'd helped him out and then got in trouble for it. The waitstaff saw Tony fire me for doing exactly what he'd told me to do. The owner offered me my job back if I was interested. I thanked him but said I was good and had enough on my plate with school. The owner was understanding about it. He seemed like a decent guy who just had terrible judgment when it came to hiring managers. About 2 months later, I ran into that cook at the grocery store. He filled me in on all the drama I'd missed. He told me the guy who replaced me had gotten fired the week before. When I asked what happened, he explained that the new guy had been taking bribes. People would pay him $20 to park in the lot and then go to the movie theater or the bars. He never even checked if they were customers. But that wasn't even the best part, he said. Tony had gotten fired too. When I asked what for, he told me the owner had caught Tony stealing. He'd been messing with the sales numbers and pocketing cash from the register every night. Apparently, it had been going on for months. The cook said the owner had admitted he should have listened to his staff from the beginning because everyone had tried to tell him Tony was bad news. So there you have it. The manager who fired me for following his rules too strictly ended up being a thief. The spoiled daughter learned that actions have results when she scraped up her fancy car. And the guy who replaced me got caught running his own little parking scam. Funny how that works. I go to the same neighborhood butcher shop for about 3 years now. It's this family-owned place that's been around forever, tucked between a laundromat and a small cafe on the corner of my street. The owner is this older gentleman who knows everyone by name and always remembers what cut of meat you bought last time. I started shopping there after getting fed up with the overpriced, low-quality meat at the big chain grocery store nearby. Today was supposed to be a quick trip. I needed some ground beef for dinner and maybe some chicken thighs if they looked good. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital where I work as a nurse, and honestly, I was exhausted. All I wanted was to grab what I needed and get home to collapse on my couch. When I approached the shop, I noticed there was a guy walking just ahead of me. He was wearing expensive-looking clothes and had this general air about him that screamed, "I'm more important than everyone else." Behind me was a woman with a small child who was maybe 4 or 5 years old. The kid was chattering away about something and his mom was patiently listening while juggling her purse and what looked like a shopping list. The guy in front reached the entrance first. There are 2 sets of doors at this place. You have to go through the first set, then immediately through a second set to get into the actual shop. He grabbed the handle of the first door and pulled it open for himself. But here's the thing. He didn't even look back to see if anyone else was coming. He just walked through and let the door swing shut right in my face. I caught the door just before it closed completely and held it open. I looked back at the woman behind me and smiled, telling her to go ahead. She thanked me and said how kind I was being. Her little boy chimed in too, cheerfully thanking me. The 3 of us walked through the first set of doors together. Now we were facing the second set, and guess what? The same guy was already through and had done the exact same thing. Just walked through without any consideration for the people behind him. I shook my head and grabbed the second door, holding it open for the woman and her child again. She gave me this grateful look that told me she'd noticed the guy's rudeness too. She made a comment about how some people just don't care about others, and I agreed with her completely. We all walked into the shop and that's when I saw my opportunity for some perfectly justified revenge. The place was absolutely packed. It was Saturday afternoon, which is always the busiest time. There had to be at least 15 people waiting around, and they used this number system where you take a ticket, and wait for your number to be called. The number dispenser was right by the entrance, one of those old-fashioned red machines where you pull a little strip of paper with your number on it. I watched the rude guy spot it and walk over. He stood there for a moment, clearly figuring out how the system worked. He was studying the machine and looking around at the other customers holding their little numbered tickets. That's when I struck. While he was still standing there trying to figure things out, I quickly stepped up to the machine and pulled not one, but two numbers. The first one was 47 and the second was 48. I handed number 47 to the woman behind me, telling her that this should help move things along. She looked at the number, then at me, and I could see the moment she realized what I'd done. A huge grin spread across her face. She told me how brilliant I was and thanked me enthusiastically. Her little boy was tugging on her sleeve, confused about what was happening. He asked his mom what was so funny, and she just told him that the nice man had helped them out. By this time, the rude guy had finally figured out the system and reached for the machine. He pulled his number and looked at it. 49. His face went through this series of expressions: confusion, realization, and then pure annoyance. He looked around and his eyes landed on me. I was standing there holding number 48 with the biggest, most innocent smile I could manage. He stared at me with this look that said he knew exactly what I'd done and wasn't happy about it. I just smiled back and gave him a little wave. The woman next to me was trying not to laugh out loud, covering her mouth with her hand. The current number being served was 38, so we all had a bit of a wait. I found a spot to stand and watch the guy keep shooting dirty looks in my direction. Every few minutes, he'd check his number again, like it might have magically changed. The woman struck up a conversation with me while we waited. She told me she couldn't believe how rude some people could be, and mentioned that her husband always told her she was too polite, but that she was raised to hold doors for people. I agreed with her, saying that it takes literally zero effort to be considerate. Her child asked when it would be their turn, and she patiently explained that they were number 47 and it would be soon. The kid held up the ticket and studied it seriously like he was memorizing it. After about 10 minutes, they called number 46. We were getting close. The rude guy was now openly staring at us, probably trying to figure out if there was any way to get ahead. He even walked over to the counter at one point and tried to get the butcher's attention. He told the butcher that he thought there might be some confusion with the numbers. The butcher, who was busy wrapping someone's order, barely looked up and just told him to wait for his number to be called like everyone else. The guy insisted that he thought someone had taken his number. The butcher explained that the machine gives out numbers in order, so if he had 49, then 48 came before him. The guy looked frustrated but couldn't really argue with that logic. He slunk back to his spot and continued staring. Finally, they called 47. The woman gathered up her child and walked to the counter with a huge smile. She thanked me again and said I had made her day. I told her I was happy to help. She ordered what she needed, just some lunch meat and a few chicken breasts. Nothing fancy, but she was polite and friendly with the butcher, asking about his family and complimenting the quality of the meat. Then they called 48. My turn. I walked up to the counter and the butcher greeted me warmly, asking if I wanted the usual today. I told him I thought I'd browse a bit since everything looked so good. I took my sweet time asking questions about different cuts, discussing cooking methods, and generally being thorough. The whole time I could feel the rude guy's eyes burning into the back of my head. I probably spent about 5 extra minutes at the counter, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're impatiently waiting your turn, it feels like forever. Finally, I finished my order and paid. When I was leaving, they called number 49. I couldn't resist one last look back. The guy practically sprinted to the counter, clearly irritated and probably about to take it out on the poor butcher. But here's the beautiful part. When I was walking out, I heard the butcher apologize and tell the customer that they had just run out of the premium ground beef and wouldn't have more until Tuesday. I couldn't see the guy's face, but I could imagine his reaction. I walked out of that shop feeling more satisfied than I had in weeks. I've worked as a lifeguard at Ocean View Beach for 3 summers now. Started when I was 18, right after high school. My dad was a lifeguard here back in the 80s, and he always told me stories about saving people and being a hero. I guess that's what drew me to the job initially, but after 3 years, I've learned it's mostly just telling people not to swim too close to the rocks and making sure kids don't run on the wet deck. The pay isn't great, but I love being outdoors and staying in shape. Plus, the beach is beautiful, and most days are pretty peaceful. I've had to make a few rescues over the years. Nothing too dramatic, usually just someone who swam out too far and got tired, or kids who got caught in a current. My training kicked in every time and everyone was always grateful. That changed last Tuesday. It was one of those days where the ocean was angry. The waves were huge, probably 8 to 10 feet, and there was a strong undertow. I've been on the loudspeaker all morning warning people to stay close to shore and not to let their kids play in the water unsupervised. Most people listened, but there's always someone who thinks the rules don't apply to them. Around 2 in the afternoon, I noticed this woman in a bright yellow bikini with her daughter, who looked about 7 or 8 years old. The little girl kept trying to run into the waves, and the mom was barely paying attention. She was on her phone the whole time, taking selfies and videos. I could see trouble coming from a mile away. I walked over to them and politely explained that the waves were really dangerous and recommended keeping her daughter in the shallow area where she could stand. The woman brushed me off, telling me her daughter was fine and that she was a good swimmer. When I tried to explain that even good swimmers could get into trouble with these conditions, she got annoyed and told me she didn't need some teenager telling her how to watch her kid. She said she'd been bringing her daughter to beaches since she was a baby. I wanted to argue, but I'd learned that sometimes you just have to let people make their own mistakes. I went back to my chair but kept watching them closely. About 20 minutes later it happened. The little girl had wandered deeper into the water and a massive wave knocked her down. The current immediately grabbed her and started pulling her out. She was screaming and thrashing, trying to fight against the water, but she was no match for the ocean. The mom finally looked up from her phone and started screaming too, but she didn't move toward the water. Neither did anyone else on the beach. The waves were too big and too dangerous for most people to attempt a rescue. I didn't even think. I grabbed my rescue tube and sprinted into the water. The current was incredibly strong, and I had to fight against it with every stroke. The little girl was about 30 yards out by the time I reached her, and she was starting to go under. I managed to get the rescue tube around her and pull her against my chest. She was panicking and clinging to me while I fought to get us both back to shore. The waves kept crashing over us, and more than once I thought we might both get dragged out further. It took everything I had to make it back to the beach. When we finally made it to shallow water, the little girl was coughing up seawater, but she was breathing. I carried her up onto the sand and was checking to make sure she was okay when her mother came running over. I expected gratitude, maybe even tears of relief. Instead, she started yelling at me, demanding to know what I had done to her daughter and why I was holding her like that. I told her I had just saved her daughter from drowning, and that she was going to be fine but needed to rest. The woman got even more angry and accused me of having no right to touch her daughter. She claimed I was holding her against my body in the water. The little girl was still coughing and clearly traumatized, and this woman was accusing me of something horrible. I explained that I was performing a water rescue and that it was literally my job. But she wouldn't listen. She kept insisting that she saw how I was holding her daughter and that I had taken advantage of the situation. The crowd that had gathered started murmuring. I could see the confusion on people's faces. Then this woman did something I never saw coming. She slapped me across the face hard while screaming at me to stay away from her daughter and calling me a pervert. That's when the crowd lost it. Everyone started yelling at once. One guy asked if she was insane and pointed out that I had just saved her kid's life. An older woman called me a hero and asked how she dared treat me that way. Another person shouted that her daughter would be dead right now if it wasn't for me. The little girl was crying even harder now, probably more scared of her mother's reaction than she had been of drowning. I was standing there with my cheeks stinging, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had already called the police and paramedics. When they arrived, the woman immediately started spinning her story. She told the officer that I had assaulted her daughter in the water and touched her inappropriately under the guise of rescuing her. The police officer looked at me, then at the crowd, then back at the woman. He asked her to tell him what happened. Before I could say anything, about 10 different people started talking at once, all telling the same story, that I had risked my life to save her daughter, and she had attacked me for it. The officer took statements from multiple witnesses, and they all backed up my version of events. One witness explained that they watched the whole thing and that I had swum out in dangerous conditions to save the little girl while the mother was on her phone and wasn't even watching her. Another witness called me a hero and said the woman should be thanking me, not attacking me. The paramedics checked out the little girl and confirmed she was fine, just shaken up. They also documented the red mark on my face where she had slapped me. The police officer asked me if I wanted to press charges for assault. I looked at the little girl who was still crying and then at her mother, who was still insisting that I had done something wrong despite all the witness testimony. I realized that if I didn't stand up for myself, she might try this again with another lifeguard or another good Samaritan. I told him yes, I wanted to press charges. They arrested her right there on the beach. When they were putting her in handcuffs, she was still screaming about how I was a predator and how the system was corrupt. The little girl was placed with a relative who came to pick her up. Later, I found out that she had a history of making false accusations and had even sued a teacher at her daughter's school for something similar. The charges stuck and she ended up with a conviction for assault and filing a false police report. I still work at the beach, and I'd do the same thing again in a heartbeat. But now I make sure there are always witnesses around when I interact with difficult parents. That little girl deserved to be saved, and I'm just glad I was there to do it. I work at this call center for almost 2 years now. When I first started, I was optimistic. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady work, and I figured if I kept my head down and did my job well, things would improve. The problem isn't just the job itself, though dealing with angry customers all day definitely takes its toll. The real issue is how management runs this place. There's this group of maybe 6 or 7 people who are basically untouchable because they're buddies with the team leads. Every single day, these people get put on what we call auxiliary status for non-call activities. It's a free pass to avoid taking calls. I watch them every day. They sit at their desks, scrolling through social media, taking long walks around the office, chatting with each other, or just pretending to look busy while doing absolutely nothing productive. Meanwhile, the rest of us are chained to our phones from the moment we clock in until we leave. The contrast is insane. While they're getting extended lunch breaks and special work-from-home privileges, I'm here taking back-to-back calls with maybe a 5-minute bathroom break if I'm lucky. If I try to take a moment to collect myself after dealing with a difficult customer, my team lead is immediately asking why my status shows unavailable. It's not just the workload inequality that gets to me, it's the petty control they exercise over everything. Last month, during rainy season, I wore waterproof sandals to work because my regular shoes had gotten completely soaked the day before. I spent 8 hours walking around in wet socks, which was miserable. Karen, my team lead, called me over to her desk. She told me I couldn't wear those shoes because company policy required closed-toe footwear. I explained that it had been raining for 3 days straight and my regular shoes were still wet from yesterday. She said that wasn't her problem and told me to go change into proper shoes or go home. I had to walk 20 minutes in the rain to buy new shoes during my lunch break, spending money I couldn't really afford. That same afternoon, we got a company-wide email about staying safe and comfortable during the rainy season. The hypocrisy was unbelievable. This kind of thing happens constantly. The favorites get away with dress code violations, extended breaks, and even showing up late. But if any of the rest of us step slightly out of line, we're written up immediately. 2 days ago, something finally gave me an opportunity to push back, even if it was in a small way. My work laptop prompted me to install a basic input-output system update. For those who don't know, this is fundamental software that your computer needs to even turn on. The thing about these updates is they're extremely sensitive. If you interrupt them, the computer becomes completely unusable. I stared at that update notification for a good 10 minutes, thinking about everything that had led me to this moment. All the favoritism, all the unfair treatment, all the times I've been made to feel like I didn't matter. An idea started forming. I called Karen over to my desk. I told her my computer was asking for some kind of system update and asked if I should install it. She just told me to do whatever it said because she didn't know anything about computers. That was all the permission I needed. I clicked install and watched the progress bar start moving. Then I waited until it was about halfway through before holding down the power button to force a restart. The screen went black. I did it again when it tried to restart, and once more for good measure. When I tried to turn it back on, nothing happened. The screen stayed black. Perfect. I walked back over to Karen's desk, putting on my most confused expression. I told her something was wrong with my laptop and it wouldn't turn on at all. She asked what I meant, so I explained that the screen was black and nothing happened when I pressed the power button. I said I didn't know what happened because it was working fine, then it asked for that update she told me to install, and now it was dead. Karen looked annoyed but not suspicious. She called over our IT guy, who took one look at the laptop and shook his head. He said it looked like the system update got corrupted somehow, and this was going to need a complete reinstall. He told Karen it could take several days to get a replacement ready. Karen asked if he couldn't just fix it. The IT guy explained that when the basic system software is fried like this, they need to wipe everything and start fresh. He said it might be easier to just get a new machine altogether. And just like that, I was off phone duty until further notice. I got assigned to some basic filing tasks that took maybe an hour to complete, leaving me with essentially a paid vacation while IT sorted out my technical difficulties. While I was enjoying my break from the phones, I overheard Karen complaining to another team lead about the situation. She said it was so frustrating when these people don't know how to handle basic computer stuff, and now they were short-staffed because I broke my laptop. The other team lead suggested maybe they should provide better training on system updates. Karen replied that maybe people should just be more careful because it's not that complicated. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Here she was, acting like I was incompetent, when she's the one who told me to just do whatever it says without any guidance. On my third day of freedom from the phones, something even better happened. Corporate decided to do a surprise audit of our department's productivity metrics. They pulled reports showing call volume, auxiliary, time usage, and efficiency ratings for the past month. Guess whose favorite suddenly had some explaining to do? When the auditors saw that certain employees were spending 60 to 70% of their time on non-call activities, while others were at 95% call time, questions were asked. Big questions. I watched from my desk when Karen got called into a closed-door meeting with the district manager. Through the glass, I could see her gesturing frantically, clearly trying to justify the massive disparity in workload distribution. By the end of the week, 3 of the favorite employees were written up for time theft. 2 others were moved to different teams, and Karen got demoted from team lead to regular supervisor with a pay cut to match. The new team lead started the following Monday with a speech about fairness and equal treatment. Call volume got distributed more evenly. The arbitrary rules about shoes and break times were relaxed. Suddenly, the workplace felt a lot more tolerable. I finally got my repaired laptop back after a week. It was actually a completely new machine since IT couldn't recover the old one. I thanked them for their hard work and got back to taking calls with a much better attitude. Sometimes the system is so broken that you have to break something yourself to fix it. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm not sorry either. When you treat people like disposable machines instead of human beings, don't be surprised when they find creative ways to remind you that they have agency. I'm about to finish my 5-year doctorate in biology, and I can't wait to move on to bigger things in medical research. You need to understand something about us science people. We basically run on caffeine. Coffee, tea, energy drinks, whatever keeps us awake during those endless lab hours and late-night data analysis sessions. When I started my program, I was the only coffee drinker on our research team. Everyone else was happy with their tea or the occasional soda from the vending machine. Being a serious coffee addict, I own multiple coffee makers at home, a nice expensive one for daily use, and a couple of cheap backup ones I picked up from thrift stores. in case my good one breaks down. You'll learn to be prepared when you're dependent on caffeine to function. Since I needed my coffee fix at work too, I brought one of my backup machines to the lab. It was nothing fancy, just a basic black plastic thing that probably cost someone $10 originally. But it made decent coffee, and that's all I cared about. For 3 whole years, I was the only person who used it. I'd make my morning pot, maybe an afternoon cup if I was pulling a late night, and that was it. Then everything changed in my 4th year when we got a new postdoctoral associate. Let me call her Karen since she fits the bill perfectly. Karen seemed nice enough at first, the kind of person you'd grab lunch with or chat with at department events. She had this friendly, bubbly personality that made her popular with everyone, but working with her day to day was a completely different story. Maybe it was because she already had her doctorate and I was still working on mine, or maybe it was the 10-year age gap between us, but Karen developed this superiority complex that drove me crazy. No matter what I suggested or contributed, she'd dismiss it like I was some undergraduate intern who didn't know anything. When I tried to suggest adjustments to our protocols based on my observations, she'd talk down to me and explain how the process actually worked, treating me like I hadn't been doing this research for years. This happened constantly, even though I had more hands-on experience with our specific research area than she did. She'd been working in related fields, but I've been deep in this particular project for years. It didn't matter to her. The worst part was her blind optimism about everyone. If I or any of our colleagues tried to tell her that someone was being unprofessional or not pulling their weight, she'd refuse to believe it. When I complained about the new lab technician leaving messes and ignoring safety protocols, she insisted he was just adjusting to our lab culture and needed more time. She never believed anyone could actually be problematic. But the thing that really got under my skin was how she refused to respect boundaries. Karen was always wanting to chat, and she wouldn't take no for an answer. I'd be clearly busy, headphones on, focused on my work, and she'd just appear at my desk wanting to discuss completely random topics, like what type of dishwasher she should buy for her kitchen. I'd tell her I was swamped and needed to focus on my work, but she'd insist it would only take a minute and hover around my workspace until I gave in. She'd go on about researching different appliance models all weekend while I sat there wanting to get back to actual work. It got so bad that I started working from home more often just to get things done without constant interruptions. But Karen was also a coffee addict, just like me. Suddenly, my little coffee maker had a second user for the first time in over 4 years. At first, I was actually happy to share it. It felt nice to have someone else appreciate having fresh coffee available. Karen started using it every single day, sometimes making multiple pots. During one of our forced conversations, she told me she'd completely stopped making coffee at home since she could just make it at work. She laughed about how convenient it was and joked that I was like her personal caffeine supplier. The way she said it really rubbed me wrong. I was providing her with something she'd come to depend on, but she'd never once offered to contribute to the cost of coffee supplies or even said a proper thank you. Now here's where my dilemma comes in. I'm graduating in a few weeks and leaving this lab forever. I'll be starting a position at a medical research facility that provides free coffee to all employees, so I won't need to bring my own machine anymore. The question that's been eating at me is simple. Should I take my coffee maker with me when I go? On one hand, I know Karen gets a lot of use out of it now. She's completely restructured her morning routine around having access to it at work. I also have a perfectly good coffee maker at home, so it's not like I desperately need this one. From a practical standpoint, leaving it would be the generous thing to do. But on the other hand, Karen has made my last 2 years in this lab pretty miserable. She's constantly undermined my confidence, dismissed my contributions, and invaded my personal space despite my clear discomfort. I've had to completely change my work patterns just to avoid her disruptions. The petty part of me wants to take that coffee maker and watch her scramble to figure out her caffeine situation without me. I keep going back and forth on this decision. Part of me thinks I should be the bigger person and just leave the machine for her to use. After all, what do I really gain by taking it? It's not like removing her access to coffee will somehow make up for all the frustration she's caused me. But another part of me is tired of always being the accommodating one. I brought that machine to work for my own convenience, used my own money to keep it stocked with supplies, and maintained it for years. Karen just happened to benefit from my preparation and foresight. Why should I leave behind something that belongs to me just because she's gotten used to having access to it? The more I think about it, the more I realize this isn't really about the coffee maker at all. It's about setting boundaries and standing up for myself in a way I haven't been able to do while we've been working together. Yesterday, I made my decision. When I pack up my desk next week, that coffee maker is coming with me. Karen will have to figure out her own caffeine solution, just like everyone else in the lab did before I brought my machine in. Maybe she'll buy her own, or maybe she'll go back to making coffee at home like a normal person. I'm done being everyone's convenient solution while getting nothing but headaches in return. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.